Well, hey, Steve, we're back to another good discussion. Our last talk we had was fantastic because we started going into processing sitting with big feelings. And I got some wonderful comments from people who appreciated that point of view and starting to recognize, a lot of us are starting to recognize that we haven't been taught as children how to take these feelings inside of us and you know, become comfortable with them without just blurting them out of a reactivity or a fear. So you and I had talked about part two of this discussion. And if I'm understanding right, we were going to discuss what you're calling self-embodiment. So my thought on that was kind of evoked by a passage that I read in Kalia LaRoche's recent book, The Path to Self-Love. And I'm going to read the quote first. I mean, this really is a good kickoff point. She says, "There is nothing spiritual or mature about tolerating a bad relationship. The healthier and more mature we become, the less tolerant we are of abusive or neglectful people." The reason this quote hit me so hard is because it made me realize that in my dealings with people, I've noticed there are basically two types of people that I end up having an interaction with. One of them is, after a conversation, I feel wonderful. I feel uplifted. I feel heard. I feel better than I did before the conversation. And the second type of interaction is the complete opposite. I feel drained. I feel invalidated. I feel belittled. And it may be subtle things that the other person says, or it may be some little digs or comments that they may think is just being sarcastic or humorous. But my gut feeling says, oh, I wish I wouldn't have had this conversation. And for many, many years, I was not aware of the gut feeling of these two types. One makes me feel uplifted. One makes me feel de-energized. So my question to you, and maybe we can kick off the conversation this way, is do you feel that gut sensitivity is a form of self-embodiment?
For me personally, I find some charge around using embodiment because of how much it's used in the variety of way that it's used. And so, yeah, I'll refer to the ability to that one has to generate enough safety that in their body that the consciousness is able to at will go from the head down into the body. And I speak about this as a process from a place of trauma in the body, having the effect of driving the consciousness up into the head as a coping mechanism and as a way to be avoidant of the pain that trauma storing in the body, I refer to as the headlocked experience, where the sense of self feels locked in the mind, locked in the head. And this is that head-heart divorce, that feeling of emptiness, that feeling of yearning, longing for wholeness, the void inside that tries to be filled, is, from my experience, in part due to a severed connection with the body, due to a unwillingness to feel that pain and to be with the discomfort of the wounding and the trauma from life.
Well, we need, I think, a little bit of a discussion about how this can be cultivated, especially in a relationship. Now, I think it's easy when you're dealing with a casual friend or someone that you don't have a deep connection with. We may get these feelings of, I'm uncomfortable around this person, but there's no heavy investment in that person in the relationship. So there's a little more tolerant level. But when we start getting into a personal relationship, this becomes very important, I believe, this need for cultivating self embodiment. Why don't we first, you give me a definition of what that means to you, and then let's talk about a way to begin to become more self-aware in these personal relationships, where it's critical that we be aware of what we're feeling and going to that gut instinct, and not going into these reactive mechanisms that happen that end up sabotaging the relationship. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what comes up for me, I think, is this deep desire we have for intimacy with ourselves, and that a lot of this topic that we're discussing is this creation of reality that we bring in people to show us where we're not in acceptance of ourselves and our parts, and not in self-embracing and self-love. And that one of the things we get to do as humans in our broad creator ability is to hide from ourselves. And in fact, that is a big part of this experience, is to go from forgetfulness to remembering. And so I find that definition of difficulty in conversation, feeling like there are these little stabs and things like that, I think it's important. These things reveal so much because it's pointing out where the forgetfulness has happened or where the hiding from self has happened. And that can be around shining a light on self-worth. It can be around shining a light on self-hatred, any manner of things where conclusions were made in order to, in the striving for a sense of safety and being able to exist and cope. So I think in order to do that, where oftentimes we might not willingly be able to shine a light on those things by ourselves, we engage somebody to come in and be a reflection of those things. And this is I think, a self-responsible view that that's not actually a acceptance and permission to receive bad, like poor treatment from somebody. I think it's important in this distinguishment of, if somebody's making me feel bad, or if I feel bad around somebody, I just got to kick them out, like high vibes only, man. This is really nuanced here, because there is an intimacy with self that's being sought. There is a part or parts who have been told they're not okay, and they're getting poked in these situations with what's being said. When I have a practice of being able to sit with the charge and work out whether what it's poking is needing resolution or my attention, or there's an opportunity for me to come into more self-acceptance. I think this is that journey of self-mastery we were talking about in our previous conversation. And I mean, I can say this is the case for me, and I hold to it. But this is a constant evolution, and like emotional mastery, I think is a really beneficial endeavor, because the way I see it is that less and less things begin to bother me when people make assessments about me, because I have a willingness to go and test inside myself or investigate and integrate those parts that have felt poked by somebody. So in that way, I see that reframe around they're an annoying person, or they drag me down, or they criticize me, or they take subtle or overt digs at me, and therefore I've just got to boot them out of my life. Well, they came to me for a reason, otherwise they wouldn't have. And so there is a service piece in that, is the reframe, rather than why do all these idiots keep coming into my life? And this same kind of annoyance is where I find myself whittled down to in these interactions with people. If it's an intimate relationship, it's waking me up. This person is in service to me, and that is an interesting piece. And then when there is grounding in that, I feel like a person's able to make a more informed decision about whether they want to conclude a relationship with that person or an interaction, or if they're just deciding to conclude an interaction with their self that they don't want to investigate any further.
Well, this fits in with the self-mastery topic. What it makes me remember is there's a story in Buddhism where the Buddha was in a town and he was talking, and some young man got aggravated and annoyed, and he came up in front of the Buddha in the town. He said, "Oh, you teachers are all alike. You just come in here and you say a bunch of pretty words, and then you just ask for food and money. Go away." And so the story is the Buddha asked the young man to come in front of him, and he says this bizarre thing. He says, "Young sir, if you buy a very nice gift for someone and you give it to them and they refuse to accept it, who does the gift belong to?" Of course, the young guy says, "Well, I guess it belongs to me because I'm the one who bought it." And he said, "Exactly. So you're giving me a gift of these angry and hurtful words, but if I do not accept it," there's the self-mastery, "then it returns to you."
Yeah, yeah. Well, what comes up for me in that situation, when I hear that story, it's perfect. Is this notion that when I am not emotionally reactive in return to somebody's behavior towards me, or something they say, or they're emotionally volatile, and I haven't always been this way. I started off emotionally reactive, and it was by being how I didn't want to be that I started moving towards how I wanted to be, and that was to be in responsibility for how I feel and hold myself when someone says something uncomfortable or attacking or something like that. I wanted to reclaim my power. And what comes up for me in that story is, yeah, you're absolutely right. If somebody is giving me the gift of the truth of their emotional experience, and I just be with myself, I take it as an opportunity to come into my center. And each time I feel that there is this emotional reactivity in me that tries to pull some energy from my core in order to be enlivened and to be given life, that I just breathe and I just focus on holding myself and hold myself steady, and just really be present for myself while this experience is going on. Then what I have found, is that the gift in your story or the expression that they've given me goes back to them, and it moves through the space much quicker, as opposed to me taking the gift and going, oh, this is a shit gift. Don't you know how I like the gifts to be in a certain shape and a certain color? Like, what were you thinking with this thing that you chose and decided to give me? This is something you like, not something I like. You see the nonsensical nature of it. And basically, that person in your Buddha story would have gone to a shop to buy a gift. That whole process is their experience. And so if I take the gift, or even if I see them holding it and I react and give them a judgment about it, I'm not letting them have their experience. So if somebody is saying something to me, it's disturbing to me, it's volatile. When I try to make them wrong, I'm saying I'm not allowing them to have their experience. And so I just came to this conclusion. I'm like, let someone have their experience. Let them feel how they feel. Because if I practice staying in my, if I practice taking responsibility and being able to steady myself and control myself and choose my experience, exercise my choice here, then I'm not making commentary on the quality of that person's gift. I'm not trying to reverse coach them or teach them how to be more appropriate so that they are more accepted in the world, which is subjective programming anyway.
Well, I love where this is going because this answers a question that I've been trying to sort in my mind. When in the last podcast we did, we talked about trust and safety. And so by becoming with this self-embodiment of what our feelings and trusting our instinct about, do I like this feeling? Or is this an uncomfortable feeling? Or is this a feeling that's making me well? And not reacting, but being able to discern that by not reacting, by not accepting the gift of their harshness, it's building what you're calling safety and trust. And it's being communicated to the other person without having to say anything, because it's an embodiment of an attitude, or it's an embodiment of a knowing of your own self-worth. I think this is brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, don't get me wrong. It's not that there is this centering kind of stoic, silent, never say anything. By all means, something can be said. If there is a if there is a degradation of the relationship by what's being said repeatedly because it's coming from a place of wounding and unprocessed trauma from childhood, like challenges with a parent that's unresolved and it's being projected now, like the work is absolutely the work. My practice is to be non-reactive. My practice is to stay present with myself. My practice as a man is to keep my heart open by allowing that person to have their experience and to not making it about me. Because once I animate a story about what I think is going on, about why this person's behaving this way, then justification comes up for me to close my heart. And it's really interesting, the chain reaction of processes that can come online from a lack of safety and trust when a story is allowed to be perceived as true. And then all of a sudden, we're both having this wounding, unhinged from reality interaction, and we'll wonder why we argue so much, and the love just seems to fall through, a net like sand.
I wanted to bring up the safety and trust issue because I process in my own mind a lot of pretty much prevention when I'm interacting with anybody. But like I said, my distinction is there are people that I don't have to worry because I end up feeling good in the conversation. It's either a vibrational thing, an energetic thing. It's a certain mysterious quality that with some people it just flows good. Like with you, I don't feel reactive or cautious about speaking my truth. But some people, I have learned that I have to kind of tread carefully because their communication tends to have digs and a little harshness. And it doesn't mean I don't like the person. It just means that I realize it's not flowing as well as it does with some other people.
Yeah.
And I don't want to spend my whole life going, you don't fit the criteria, you're gone.
Yeah.
There's got to be some play here. And so developing the ability to have a skill of self-monitoring, self-worth, self-embodiment, these are all synonyms to me. Because what I want with every interaction, no matter who it is, even my worst enemy, is I want a sense of this safety and trust. I feel that those are superpowers, but it comes from deep levels of maturity and the ability to own up to what's in me already.
Yeah.
And that's why I love this talk, because
yeah, I love what you're saying, because and there's so much coming up. It comes down as well to one's own safety and trust inside themselves to be able to speak the truth. Because for somebody who may be conflict avoidant, speaking the truth can feel really dangerous. And I think many of us have gotten to a desire for trust and safety in our relationships by not having it, by not feeling it. And it's a commitment that both people are able to make. But also, I keep in mind, and what's coming up for me just now is this temptation for me, certainly, or this preference for stability and predictability, and how that desire creates systems that can constrict or define terms of operation that then make bad anything that falls outside of that system. And I think that's what Kali, I think, is representing from a psyche perspective, is this volatile, like destroying structure. I'm going to come in and just burn it all down. I think prevention could be seen as a form of trying to control the external environment so that these sensitivities are not activated, which the danger there could be a stifling of the broad range of experience in order to bring things into a pathway that doesn't trigger. And I think this is really nuancing down now into this new age concept of love and light only, because the other 50% is that the uncomfortable stuff is just as good of a teacher as well, and that it's our responsibility to be in harmony with the light and the dark.
Oh, yeah, because I covered this in a recent video called Embracing Paradox, where I posed the idea that we not try to resolve the paradox in favor of the light. In the new age movement, I mean, we're kind of getting that message of be positive all the time, be loving all the time, and you know, I've kind of come to this conclusion that the best you can do is be in the center, and you can lean toward the light, but you cannot just get rid of the darkness or the pain in favor of just the light. And I see a lot of new agey guru type people. That's kind of their message, you know. And it's I've tried it; it does not work.
Yeah, I think some of the most well considered and well balanced people that I come across and that I follow, the likes of Gabor Mate, who works with trauma. This is a person who intimately knows the dark and has understood it for the catalyst that it is, that it serves in so much as to educate somebody in a system of lostness, in a system of confusion that we is a part of the experience that we have when we come here. There's no avoiding it. And that it's better to face it and develop a competency in becoming intimate with it, but not being of it, in order to be able to acknowledge it and be with it. Because oftentimes what keeps it persistent is a denial of it, is a pushing away from, is a leaning out. And all that happens then is it just persists somewhat unconsciously as a weight, as a avoidance of self. But what's interesting is that we are in full creation choice. And so we can take aspects of ourselves and twist them so that they forget themselves. But nonetheless, our light's inside of that. And so it is reclamation is really important. The ability to, and this is what I do in my work, is to understand that we have an adult self that's able to go to those parts that have been told they're not okay, that have forgotten themselves, and to sit with them and understand them and really allow them to speak about their experience, so that they are, instead of being told like you're not okay, like get down whenever they come up, that kind of thing, it's like, all right, thanks for your patience, like thanks for holding on this long. I'm now in a position where I'm safe enough to come back and visit you and to understand your hurt and your pain, and really allow you to be heard, and just really allow you, full stop. The shifts are profound when the opposite of denial and suppression approaches are taken. It has a really releasing, liberating effect. But again, if there is a denial of the dark, it perpetuates a stuckness of these things to remain forgotten, to remain not okay parts of ourselves. There is nothing wrong with us.
So in that comment that I made about I take the preventative approach, I was thinking about an encounter I had 25 years ago or so. I was on the phone with a woman, I don't even remember who it was, and I must have gotten defensive, and I said some kind of unkind remark, and I knew it the moment I did. And she did not react. She did not have a negative response. And I couldn't bring myself to apologize. So a couple of days later, uh, I called her to apologize. And I'll never forget what she said to me. She said, I have learned a long time ago to always practice pre-forgiveness. And it was like what she was saying, and I didn't even realize it till you and I had this conversation, is that she'd come to this place where she was just going to release the charge, as you call it, in the moment.
That seems
And
quite
that's
masterful.
a
Would
good
you agree?
example of self-mastery.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think the thing that's impressive about that, and what um, I see it as emotional mastery, is that it's self-responsible, and she did not. There's this notion that there are two versions of another person. One is the one that exists inside of me, my idea of that person, and the other one is the physical person out there. And I am in control of the one inside of me, the idea that I have of that person. And that that comes into play for me with your story, which is to practice pre-forgiveness. That is to forgive the person inside. And I don't know if you experienced this, but the sense that I got from your story and myself in similar situations is there's a feeling of um, I don't know, they're not holding you in jail. Energetically, you can feel that that person's not carrying charge around that. It just, and again, you're kind of left with your own gift and deciding what you want to do about it. And if it's left with you, I mean, you followed up with her a couple of days later and you're like, hey, I need to talk to you about this because I'm not feeling great about it or whatever. And if it's true that she has mastered that pre-forgiveness, then what a great way to exercise personal freedom and be self-empowered uh, as a choice things get when difficult things come her way.
Now, there's a wonderful line to add to that from the self-study book called A Course in Miracles, where it says, do you want to be happy or do you want to be right? And it really does come down to personal choice, situation by situation with each person. And what I'm getting out of this talk is how important it is to make that choice every day, whether it's pre-forgiveness, releasing the charge, having self-mastery, instead of just thinking I'm going to pull out this skill in the moment when I need it. It doesn't work that way. It's got to be something that me personally, I would have to wake up every morning and say, this is my purpose, until it becomes a habit.
Yeah,
And self-mastery is something that you really have to want. You have to want it and desire it
yeah,
and make an effort, because not only for yourself, but to be your beautiful force in the world
yeah.
of bringing harmony and peace to other people, we have to walk it.
Absolutely. I think a commitment, a morning commitment, really primes the mind for the day. Um, Also, creating that connotation in each conversation that this is my practice opportunity. This is my chance to practice, and just shortening that distance between reactivity and this is where I can just cool my jets a little bit and just focus on myself rather than this desire to want to trampoline back at the other person what I think, or tennis back to the other person what I think I've received and I don't want it. And the turmoil of my inadequacies and my insecurities and being made wrong and stuff like that. Yeah, I really loved what you said about do I want to be happy or do I want to be right? And that's absolutely it. And what came up for me was, do I want to be right or do I want to be free? And for me, freedom is that self-empowered, self-responsible choice. And this woman that you said who practices pre-forgiveness, that seems to have the energy of freedom in it. Yeah, that I'm in choice.
I have another interesting story that I studied martial arts in my 30s for several years. And what I realized in training, you get to the point where you're always looking for this opportunity to test your skills. And it's not like you're looking to be attacked, but the martial art training creates within you kind of a different sense of perception where you see potential threat and you're in a state where you're ready to respond to it. And I remember bringing this up to my teacher, who was very high Olympic judo champ. He lived in Houston, and I asked him one day, I said, I'm working out this thing about I'm always looking for potential danger to protect myself. And I said, I don't know if this is good or bad. And I'll never forget his answer. It took me a while to figure it out, but he said, once you have one answer to everything, all your problems are solved. And I said, what does that mean, one answer to everything? And he says, it's your initial reaction. He said, you can't have multiple reactions that you practice. Your brain can't do that. You're either going to avoid, step off the line of attack, or you're going to do block and punch, or you're going to kick, or you're going to grapple. He said, whatever is your initial reaction is the reaction that's going to happen. And he said, this relates to psychological self-defense. And I think this pre-forgiveness, I think this self-embodiment as a practice is the ideal. It is the ideal initial reaction to practice. It is the one answer for everything.
Yeah.
What do you feel about that?
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. I think there's benefit in that. And what it also brings up for me is how well can somebody be with themselves if they feel like they get it wrong in this pursuit of self-mastery, that they are reactive or they do say something that receives an unfavorable response. There's a whole nother skill set to being able to hold oneself whilst practice is in play, because it's through failure that failure is a very important piece of the educational process. Getting it wrong. So yeah, that's just as important as the pursuit of mastery, because mastery can become a more acceptable disguise for like self-flagellation, self-beating up. And so it's an important thing that being able to be non-reactive with self is also part of it as well.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. Once again, we nailed it out, and always want to end by inviting people to check you out if they want to have a Compassion Keys session with you. You do have a calendar where a person can book online. We'll put your contact information is on Instagram, right? If somebody
Yeah,
wants to book with.
yeah. It's I always like to start with a connection, to reach out to me, send me a message, let me know what's coming up. We'll have a brief interaction, and if it's a good fit to work together, then yeah, we'll absolutely do that. And yeah, with compassion as the modality, based on, yeah, what I explained before, with that parts work and extending understanding and compassion to those ostracized parts.
All right. Well, till next time, let's say goodbye. Thank you,
Yeah.
Steve.
Thanks, Leo. See you later.